right, Kyle, the red light's on. So this is when typically a lot of people get nervous. I hope you're not one of those types.
No.
You all right? You're comfortable? You can do this?
I've done a few radio interviews and that before, so.
All right. Well, hey, everybody, we heard it. We have a professional here, so he'll lead the way, and we got it. We're pretty good to go here. Well, let's start off with a quick sound check. What'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Toast and eggs.
All right, nice. How do you like those scrambled, sunny side up? What do you do with those eggs?
Sunny side up.
Yeah. Any hot sauce? Anything funny on it, or just eggs?
Nah, just straight up.
All right, cool, awesome.
Salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper, yeah. A little salt and pepper always is nice on those. Cool. Well, I think we're sounding good. Why don't we jump into it? So, Kyle, why don't you tell my listeners what you're currently raising money for over on Kickstarter?
It's for my next collection of watches called the Legera series. It's my 5th Kickstarter to date for the brand. You know, sometimes I do get the question, why do I use Kickstarter multiple times if I've been successful on the first one? It's simply because if people see a big sum of money, they think that wow, you know, he's got that much money at his disposal. But watches cost money to produce, and that's what I need to deliver to my backers. So I usually invest profits in extra stock of the watch that I continue to sell, as well as producing new models, so prototypes, etc. I will say, though, this will be my last time using Kickstarter or crowdfunding as a means of funding a collection of watches. I'll move over to my website next time.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely get into that here in a second. So tell me a little bit about the brand and the watches and like, you know, how do you describe this to somebody who's just listening right now?
Okay. Well, I have a passion for classic cars, for racing, and for watches in general. I grew up, my father was a racing and rally driver. I'm originally from South Africa, Cape Town.
Oh, yeah.
And I moved to Switzerland 10 years ago for family reasons. And I always wanted to start my own brand, but before there was crowdfunding, you literally had to produce 500 of a watch and then try and sell it. Mm-hmm. There was no way of pre-funding or something like that. It just wasn't known. So as soon as I found Kickstarter, I developed the concept, and Straton is basically vintage inspired, retro inspired watches that have a sort of touch of motorsport, a touch of classic sort of racing influence. And what I try to do with my designs is I don't brand my watches, I don't overly brand them. Mm-hmm. I want a person to be able to recognize them by the styling on its own. And I can probably say after my 3rd collection, that's when people started to say, that's a Straton watch. You know, I built up what's called in the micro brand space. That's what I'm called in the watch world, a micro brand. It's usually a one-man operation that does sort of design work, and they manage everything on their own, but they outsource the manufacturing to a manufacturing partner. Mm-hmm. So, interesting. Yeah, that's basically Straton in a nutshell, I would say.
Nice. So each campaign was for a new collection of watches and a new design?
Yeah. My first one was called the Vintage Driver Chrono. I wanted 15,000 Swiss francs. It's around 1-1 to the US dollar, so $15,000. And I would have been happy to reach that at the end of 30 days. And to my surprise, I hit that within the first hour. And I was completely blown away. I mean, I didn't expect it. It was just totally unexpected.
Yeah.
And it just took off from there. I mean, I ended up at around just under 160,000 in terms of funding. And yeah, that's my eyes were opened, and I was extremely happy. And you know, I could literally put everything I had into that and see where it went. And yeah, it grew pretty quickly.
That's great. That's great. What's changed maybe over the last 5 campaigns? Has there been any sort of big changes that you've seen from the first Kickstarter to this one?
Yeah, I certainly increased in funding, although this current campaign that's on at the moment, it is probably the lowest funding to date so far. I just think though it's because of the uniqueness of the design. It's pretty niche. But I would say what's changed for me, and maybe my decision in terms of why I'm moving away from crowdfunding, is if we look at the watch space in crowdfunding. I'm only talking about watches. The watch community themselves are looking down more and more upon crowdfunded watches, because a lot of them are sort of get rich quick scams. So they're not scams, but you know, it's that typical marketing, you know, a luxury watch and affordable price. It's all the same marketing regurgitated. And it's literally, the guys aren't putting much design work in the background. They're literally taking off the shelf parts, just putting their own logo on and trying to make a buck. Whereas it's giving those guys who do put in a lot of work into it a bad name. So I want to sort of move away from that. And this campaign has been the first time I've had customers tell me, look, Kyle, maybe you should move away from crowdfunding. So I already had that in my head, but I will say that I've used it so much and up to date because of the ease of Kickstarter's platform. And I've always defended Kickstarter quite rigorously when there was a lot of negativity, where people say, "Oh, you're taking advantage of the marketing that Kickstarter gives you." 90%, even more, of my pledges were from my own marketing work.
I don't think Kickstarter has much traffic anymore at all. We just have a campaign that we were on the front page for a while, and it didn't equal anything.
Didn't do much.
Right. Yeah. So who cares? You know, we were in a newsletter for a campaign a couple weeks ago. Nothing. You know, now if this was 2013, oh my gosh, like, like the whole world would open up. The golden days, you know, without having to, and I never ran Facebook ads either. I just did some Twitter posts, and I raised $100,000. That's crazy. The good old days. Well, that's intriguing. You kind of answer some of my questions, because I'm always sort of fascinated with watches that are doing numbers along your numbers, right? Because we as an agency don't even want to talk to watch companies anymore, because I don't know the nuances enough. I've actually found that, like, I think right now there's probably 40 projects might be on there. I don't even know how many. I mean, so your success probably comes from being an early adopter of the platform itself, and bringing those audiences and that through all the process. But it is a very, very saturated market. So I can see where your mindset's going, frankly. I can tell you, you're not off. That's intriguing. That's intriguing. So tell me a little about, like, racing and that background. So you said your dad was a rally racer. Is that what he was?
A rally racing driver.
Okay.
So, I've sort of, through the success of my business, I've used that as a marketing platform for myself. So I was able to buy a race car, which I use to market the brand as well. It's classic Alfa Romeo, and that's I race in Germany, and on the Green Hell, what's called the Nordschleife, which is the longest and most dangerous racetrack in the world.
Nice.
One lap, it's around, including the original racetrack, it's 24 kilometers long. Wow. One lap, and we would do 15 laps of that.
Wow.
So it was quite fun, because I would leave on a Friday lunchtime, drive 6 hours to Germany, get to bed, wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, drive 3.5 hours, race, and then jump back in the car and drive 6 hours back home.
That's a lot of car time.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's great. That's awesome. So, and then so from there, then where was that step though, where you thought, just in terms of, like, let's go back to like the first campaign and stuff, like, where does watches start fitting into seeing racing, and like, how do you start putting together this sort of idea that this is what you wanted to do?
I think you know, watches and cars have been together, one can say, for ages. I mean, if you think back to Steve McQueen and the Tag Heuer and or Heuer originally, as it was known before Tag purchased them. There's a lot of racing prominence in the world of watches, and it's a platform where a lot of watchmakers use to promote their brands. I think it just goes together, you know, timing. Usually racing watches are chronographs and have a tachymeter scale to measure distance and that time. So yeah, I think the idea was there. It was just putting it together, and yeah, it sort of fell into place. And I can call myself lucky, because as I said, we spoke about the golden days, and I literally think back then in 2015, if I had launched 6 months later, I wouldn't have had the same success.
Yeah.
Because we then just saw a flurry of sort of motorsport inspired watches or racing watches, and then the guys just saw that it was sort of working, and everybody just sort of cottoned on, and
yeah,
you know, you had multiple campaigns, and yeah. But I consider myself lucky to be one of the first there, and yeah.
That's cool. Now, when you start putting together like a collection together, like what starts that process? What do you do you just start sketching something somewhere? Do you try to find what starts the process when you say, I'm going to put together a new collection of watches?
I think for me, I love, my inspiration comes from 70s chronographs. In terms of design and aesthetics, that is the era that's most aesthetically pleasing for me. So, you know, bold color schemes, the case designs are unique. It's just they're sort of out there. And I basically, because I have my own collection of 70s chronographs, and also just generally looking at pictures online, I sort of pick parts. I sort of see an idea in a watch and I like it, and I take that single part, and then I would take another part from another watch that I saw, and I piece everything together. So my watches aren't a copy or a homage, they call it, of any one watch. It's basically, people can see many watches in my design, but I have my own sort of unique styling. And that's why I said my aim was always for a person to recognize a Straton watch by seeing the colors and the designs and that's happening, because I don't have my name written on the dial. It's a simple S, and yeah, it's worked. I've had people that don't even need to ask, they just say that's a Straton watch.
That's great. That is true brand recognition, right? When you don't have to I always get into a healthy amount of discussion with clients who are like, you know, it's their first time out, and they're like, my brand voice is so important. It's like, you have a logo right now. A brand is when somebody recognizes you years from now. That's actually your brand. You know, you're not there yet. So that's great that you've got that going. Now, you mentioned earlier, are you still like a one-man team right now, or is it just you? Or
yeah.
How do you stay organized? I mean, just running a Kickstarter alone is a ton of work. So how do you sort of stay focused, stay organized, stay on top of everything, and handle from A to Z?
Sure. I think for first-time creators, it's a lot of work, because they're sort of in new territory and don't know what to do, and sort of take it day by day. I think for me, being somewhat of a veteran, it's become a lot easier. So I think for me, even though I run Straton on my own, so I do everything from design work to customer service. When the watches are finished, I fly out to my manufacturer. No watch leaves the factory without being packed by me and sent to my customers by me. That's how I keep below a 1% defect rate, which is Swiss watch industry standards. I also must say that at the same time, I have a full-time job besides Straton. So Straton's run on the side, which is great, because Straton is somewhat now of I know what to do, and it's sort of a well-oiled machine, and I need to put in a certain amount of time at night and pack watches at night or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a wife and 3 kids, so
Busy. That's full court press.
I'm
Well,
pretty busy.
yeah. Are there any you know, are there any tools that you use or you rely on, like, you know, to-do lists or project management tools? Is there just, you know, anything that you would be like, listen, this is how I stay organized. I use Google Docs for this sort of stuff. Is there any sort of tools that you point to?
I would probably say I rely a lot on my own head. I'm,
Hey,
I'm a little
that's
bit
one thing
old
too.
school in,
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
little bit old school in that way. My father and my mom have always said to me from a young age, you got to use the diary, you got to use the diary. But I just never adopted that. But I think if there's something really important, I just put in my iPhone calendar. But to be honest, I everything's up here.
Yeah.
And I try and stay organized, which I obviously do. And it sort of works for me, but I think for other people, maybe sort of a structured system in place and a to-do list and that. Yeah.
So how about outside of maybe doing the rally driving and stuff, being a driver for that, what do you do to just make sure that you're still unwinding a little bit so that you're not burning the candle at both ends all the time?
Sure.
Or, or do
I
you?
look, I enjoy my free time. I mean, with my kids, we also go fishing, and we play computer games, video games together. And yeah, just I can't always be on the go, but you know, I as I said, I do love cars, and my business, you know, Straton, I don't see it as work. I love what I do. So,
Mhm.
you know, the most, I can probably say the most enjoyable part of the whole job for me is, or my hobby, passion, business is the design process.
Mm.
So I would lay in bed at night when my wife goes to bed, and I would sit in Microsoft PowerPoint and put together a design. It probably takes about 1,000 changes before I'm happy with it. So my manufacturer bears with me, but in the beginning I used to apologize for making so many changes, and they just said to me after a while, there's no need to say sorry, because we want to make something that you're happy with, because we know that when you're happy with it, it will do well
Right, right.
in terms of selling.
That's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of details that goes to designing a watch. It's not so easy, and I don't have a watch background or anything, so I'm self-taught.
Mm.
But yeah, it's fun.
That's
It's
great.
fun.
That's great. Was there anything in this current collection that, when you were designing, sort of putting the process together, that maybe you hit into a roadblock? Was there something that you just couldn't do, or I don't know? Was there just something that, you know, like you had to pivot around at all?
I would say difficulty in is, we can only, for micro brands, we all use, and some bigger brands as well, we all use movements that larger manufacturers produce.
Mm-hmm.
So say Seiko or ETA, Swiss movements, automatic movements, or quartz movements, Ronda. We have to produce something which uses one of those movements. So by design, we have to circumnavigate that. We
Right,
have to,
right.
that's sort of the first decision, is what movement am I going to use. And what I find a bit difficult, because I do chronographs, especially an automatic chronograph, it's probably the thickest movement that you can have. And thickness, I've come to learn, is over the years, is very important to a watch enthusiast. Many people don't want a thick watch. They
Hmm.
want it as thin as it can be. But having an automatic chronograph already puts you in a category where it's thick.
It's thicker, right?
So yeah, designing something where it can be as thin as possible, it's not easy. And certainly with this one, this design, where I chose 2 cases. The one is a bullhead, which means the pushers are at the 12 position instead of on the side and
Hmm.
at the 3 position. but at the same time, I wanted the dial to be slanted from top to bottom, so that when it's on your wrist and you're driving, it's more in your view.
Interesting.
It's easy to see. But with that and the thickness of the movement, it made the case thick. So yeah, it's difficult.
Interesting. How about, maybe like a follow-up to that would be, what was the moment that you knew you had something that you were ready to go? Like when is that moment that you stop and you go, all right, I don't need to tweak anymore. This is great, that we're ready to go. What is that moment that you're looking for?
It's literally just the word wow pops in my head. That's it. Everything, every small detail just fits together. And as I said, it takes about roughly around 1,000 changes and over a 2.5 month process. So basically I make changes in the evening. By that time, when I wake up in the morning, my manufacturer would have made the changes for me. I can review them and make more changes, and then the next day I would receive it back and then make more changes, and so on until I'm done.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, let's flip over to the actual Kickstarter. So when we're talking about a week to go, again, you had about a $14,000 or $15,000 goal US here, and you're currently sitting at 125,000 with 254 backers. So that was great. And we talked a little bit that obviously this isn't your first rodeo. Still, was there any data points that you were looking at before you hit the launch button in terms of people interested in this new collection? I don't know, email signups. What were you kind of looking for behind the scenes before you decided to hit the launch button?
Sure. I do look at engagement to posts. I mean, I have an organically grown Facebook page for my brand, 100% real followers, likes at around 51,500. So I look at engagement, feedback. I've got a 9,000 newsletter list. I look for questions, etc. But the thing is, one can never really know. When you hit that launch button, what's going to happen? But I certainly, I think this time around, I wanted to launch this specific campaign already in September. Unfortunately, the prototypes weren't ready. I didn't want to launch over Christmas like I did the previous year, because I felt that even though I hit a high goal, I felt it could have done better if it wasn't around the Christmas period. I think this time, though, there's quite a few campaigns that are heavily supported by the watch community right now. Some of them are my peers and friends of mine that I've learned, gotten to know over the years. There was sort of a group of us in Facebook that look out for each other and discuss business and ups and downs and try and motivate each other. I think that just all and the uniqueness of the design itself, that maybe it hasn't done as well as the others. But I think the last 48 hours have always been, for me, if you look at kicktrack.com, where you can track the campaign. If you look at every one of my last campaigns, the last 48 hours have always gone, it's skyrocketed. It's done like 50K in 48 hours.
Right.
I'll need to see if the same thing happens. We just never know. Yeah.
Has there been anything sort of unique in your dashboard this time around? Any countries that popped up that you're like, oh wow, we're selling a lot in Singapore or something? I don't know, just anything that's unique?
No, nothing this time, out of the ordinary. I sort of rely a lot on sort of YouTube reviewers, written reviews on watch websites, etc. And then my own sort of Facebook and Instagram advertising. I'm of course happy that this is funded, and I think what I've chosen to do this time is I would like to move away from the pre-order model. So this time, instead of ordering using the profits and ordering excess stock to continue to sell that specific model. I'm investing the profits in funding outright 2 new models, so that I can move away from that pre-order model, because right now, when that funding ends for this current Kickstarter, it's only going to be delivered in August, which is a long wait.
Yeah.
You know, many people don't want to wait that long. So I'm using the profits, starting a full production. So it's going to be 500 pieces of each of a new model, 1,000 pieces in total. And literally a few weeks before they delivered, I'll start a very short pre-order.
Sure.
And I think that's the way to go in the future. I think to win more customers who don't want to wait so long. Yeah.
So you see, and then do you see yourself kind of just doing this all through like your Shopify store and stuff, just being like, hey, we've got a 7-day window to pre-order, but then we launch this thing, still launching on a Tuesday per se, but it's just literally on your Shopify store type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I wish though that, you know, a lot of my peers, they use sort of a deposit, we can call it scheme.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not in the bad sense, where they literally ask for $100 up front and then the balance before delivery.
Right.
To date, I don't know of an app in the Shopify store that supports 2 payments.
Yeah.
I wish there was, because it would make it a lot easier.
I think the best way to do that right now is through ClickFunnels. Well, I don't know about the best, but a way to do it. ClickFunnels has a way that you can build like a sales page, but have the payment split up in 2 things type of thing, right? So you would say like, hey, I'm going to charge you $100, $99 today, and in 3 months or 3 days, whenever your delivery date is, you'll get charged again, something along those lines. But you've got to build it in that platform. So, but I don't think there is anything in Shopify. You're right. To make that.
I wish the developer would. I think they would make quite a bit of money if they build an app that costs money.
Well, there's your next idea. Let's get going. That's great. So what do you tell, let's say somebody out there is thinking about getting, maybe not just in the watch world, but into maybe like
anything
a men's
crowdfunding.
Yeah, or a men's product line or something like that. What would you tell them right now? What should they focus on? Where should their brains be to get to a point where they're running 4 or 5 successful campaigns over the course of 5 or 6 years?
Sure. Look, I think before starting, Straton, there was always one saying that was prevalent in my mind, which is you got to do something that you love and enjoy. So I always had my eyes open, even now. I keep my eyes and ears open for even the simplest of ideas, because if we look at crowdfunding in general, and some of the simplest ideas can be the most successful. And it doesn't have to be anything new. It can just be a rendition of something old. Or I think if one looks out for a simple idea that doesn't require much investment up front, because I literally only invested for my first campaign $1,500 up until launch date, and I had a marketing budget of $2,000, and that's what I used to reach my first funding goal. So I just think advice is one needs to. A lot of people think with crowdfunding as well that you sort of put together an idea and you just slap it on the website and it'll fund.
Yeah, it should fund.
I literally pre-market my products, even though I've built up an existing list. Even my first campaign, it was about 4 months before I was launching. I was already building awareness.
Yep.
Posting pictures of prototypes, etc., that were not finished at different stages. I think people definitely need to build awareness and already have a plan. Where it's become more difficult, it has, not just in watches, but in other things to get that recognition, that free marketing from different avenues. I think today a lot of these websites and that who, you know, that they want something for, you know, they want to be paid. It's not free press anymore. You know, everybody wants something and it costs. I definitely think that part of the industry has become a little bit dirty, I would say.
Oh yeah.
But I think is it the FCC in the US?
Yep, that's it. Yep.
You know, that sort of put rules and laws in place where, you know, reviewers and that have to disclose that they are getting something in return.
But it's not policed. So it's like they make rules, but, you know, so like there's a ton of this going on in like Instagram, you know, the Instagram, like all these people who are influencers and they're literally like wearing a Coca-Cola shirt on purpose and holding a hoverboard thing on purpose, you know. That's not their typical Tuesday. That's a paid for Tuesday. So
yeah. So
but
I certainly think it hasn't gotten easy in crowdfunding world, but I think if I'm glad something like that exists, because it gives somebody with a good idea a platform to test that idea. And that is where it hasn't been. There hasn't been something like that before. But I always think, though, a genuine campaign with a good idea, with maybe just a good story behind it, I think that's what sells. People buy not only the product, but the story behind it. And I think if you can put that story across in any entrepreneurial endeavor in a way that comes across as sympathetic, as genuine, people will support your cause.
Oh, I agree completely. I think you're going to see in general crowdfunding get more and more to that story driven, back to kind of what it was. And I think it's just getting away from the as seen on TV vibe that Kickstarter maybe has for the last 18 months. The newest jacket that heats you up and keeps, you know, like there's only so many of those that you can see before you're like, all right, I got it. You know, whatever. So what do you see for yourself? I mean, what happens, you know, you mentioned August, around that sort of time, but you know, the money comes in a couple days or whatever, 2 weeks or so. What starts your process, and then where do you sort of see like the next year sort of looking like for you?
As soon as the campaign ends, then it's waiting the 14 days until the payments go through to send out the surveys. I use Kickstarter surveys, and then getting the answers and processing that for production numbers. I think for me, I'm in a very that typical 3-year stage of every business, where I've reached a plateau, and I can stay as I am and live comfortably doing it as I am, or I'm looking at the decision where I have to take on an investor, where I can grow the brand into something much larger than it is. But it's a difficult decision because it means that I have to give away something that I've built from day one. But I've made the decision where I would like to take that plunge. But it doesn't need to be anybody. I don't just need money. It has to be someone who has sort of similar frame of mind to me, you know, brings something to the table, you know, bit of guidance as well, you know, and being an entrepreneur can be quite lonely at stages, and
you're preaching
that's where I am right now.
You're preaching to the choir over here. We're, as an agency, we've been around really technically since 2009, but in this form since 2000, we're in our third year, and we're in that same boat of like, we can be this sort of like decent age, like this agency right here fitting this niche, you know, or we have to somehow get bigger and have like 70 employees, you know, like what, you know, And that is, that's different. That's, you know, this podcast wouldn't be as informal if I had 70 people working. We would have a whole team of people,
Exactly.
you know, and,
Yeah.
you know, and then there would also be like, well, how are you making money off the podcast? It's like, I'm not, I just want to connect with people. And that's why I do this, like connecting and sharing stories and, hey, what did you do that worked? And, you know, and it's, all that decision starts to change moving forward. So you're not alone in that. We're right there at the same point over here. So, well, that's great. Yeah. So, I mean, so it sounds like you've got, you know, big decisions on your hands here. It sounds like you've got a great product going on. How can people dive into your world, learn more, look at all your collections? How can they find you online?
Yeah, they can visit my website, www.stratonwc.com. The great thing about a microbrand and being a one-man show is any channel that someone tries to contact me, whether it's, or the brand, whether it's through Facebook, Instagram, email, they're always talking to me.
Yeah.
You know, many people are surprised and you know, they're sort of right in the chat, is this Kyle? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, wow.
I got a hold of you. I found the CEO.
I think that it makes a big difference. It certainly does, because you just don't have that with larger brands.
Mm-hmm.
And people appreciate that one-on-one contact.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm no email or message goes unanswered for more than 12 hours. You know, it's my morning ritual is normally, you know, I'll wake up, say good morning, and then have my phone for the next 15 minutes and answer all the emails and messages. And yeah.
Well, Kyle, I appreciate you taking time out of your day here. I know it's busy around your neck of the woods here, but again, I recommend everybody go check out your Kickstarter right now. You've got about 7 days to go here or so, and really great campaign, great project, great conversation, and I wish you nothing but success in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Jeff.
All right, thanks.
Keep well. Bye-bye.